The scent of Whitney's expensive perfume, the one that always smelled like smug satisfaction and lilies, was the first thing I registered most mornings. That, and the way she'd pat my hand, her rings cold against my skin. "Morning, sleepyhead," she'd chirp, her voice dripping with a sweetness that could give you cavities. "Ready for another beautiful day? My name is Livia, and for the last 2 years, since the accident that nearly snapped me in half, my days had been anything but beautiful. They were a monotonous blur of beige walls, bland food, and Whitney's suffocating presence. She was my older sister, my self-appointed guardian angel, the one who'd swooped in to manage things while I was still trying to remember how to breathe on my own. Manage things, in Whitney's world, meant managing me, and more importantly, managing my trust fund. "Just a little something to keep you comfortable, sweetie," she'd say, fluffing my pillows with unnecessary vigor. "Don't you worry your pretty little head about the grown-up stuff. It's all for your protection." Protection. That was her favorite word. It covered everything from why I wasn't allowed to see my old friends. "They'll just upset you, Liv. You're too fragile," to why she handled all my finances. My parents, Evelyn and Rory, bless their worried, easily manipulated hearts, lapped it up. They saw Whitney, the responsible older daughter, sacrificing her time to care for her broken sister. They didn't see the glint in her eye when she signed papers on my behalf, or the way her wardrobe had suddenly exploded with designer labels I knew I couldn't afford even before the crash, let alone now. I'd watch from my chair. The one Whitney insisted was best for my posture, as she'd breeze in, swinging a new Chanel bag. "Oh, this old thing?" she'd trill if I even glanced at it, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Just a little pick-me-up, retail therapy, you know?" I knew. I also knew that my trust fund, the one our grandfather had set up to ensure my future, was substantial. And it was apparently funding a lot of Whitney's therapy sessions at Neiman Marcus. The doctors had said my recovery would be slow. They'd talked about cognitive fogginess, memory lapses. Whitney had latched onto that like a lifeline. It was so much easier to control someone everyone thought was barely there. So, I played the part. My words were often slow, my gaze distant. It was amazing what people would say, what they would do, when they thought you weren't capable of understanding. "Mom, Dad, she had a bit of a rough night," Whitney would tell them during their brief, anxious visits, her arm draped lovingly over my shoulder. "A little confused this morning, but we're getting there, aren't we, sweetie?" I'd offer a weak smile, a slight nod. Inside, I was a coiled spring of fury. Confused? Oh, I wasn't confused. I saw everything. I saw the way she'd quickly click off her laptop screen when I was wheeled into the room. I saw the discreet deliveries from high-end boutiques. I saw the way her boyfriend, Jet, a preening peacock of a man, had started driving a sports car that was suspiciously similar to one I'd once idly mentioned wanting. The fogginess I feigned was my shield and my observation deck. Every condescending pat, every dismissive remark, every stolen glance at a bank statement she thought I couldn't comprehend, I filed it all away. My body might have been a prison, but my mind was sharpening itself into a weapon. One afternoon, Whitney was on the phone in the hallway, her voice a low conspiratorial murmur. She thought I was napping. I'd gotten very good at feigning sleep. My hearing, at least, was sharper than ever. "Absolutely divine, Jet. The infinity pool alone is to die for." A pause, then a tinkling laugh that made my skin crawl. "Don't you worry your handsome head about the cost, baby. Livia's little fund is paying for it all." Another laugh, colder this time. "She'll never know. Poor thing barely knows what day it is." My eyes snapped open in the dim light of my room. The air felt thick, unbreathable. She'll never know. The casual cruelty of it, the sheer arrogance, settled in my chest like a block of ice. A slow, burning rage started to melt it, drop by painful drop. Oh, I knew. And she was going to find out just how much. That little fund wasn't just going to pay for her vacation. It was going to pay for her downfall. And I, the poor thing who barely knew what day it was, would be the one to deliver the bill. The memory of those first few weeks after the accident is still a hazy nightmare. Flashes of sterile white rooms, the beeping of machines, and Whitney's face, always Whitney's face, looming over me. "It's okay, Liv," she'd murmur, her hand cool on my forehead. "I'm here. I'll take care of everything." And everyone let her. My parents, Evelyn and Rory, were shattered. They saw a daughter hovering between life and death, and another daughter, strong and capable, stepping up. They clung to Whitney like a life raft. I was weak. Genuinely weak then. My thoughts were like fish swimming through murky water, hard to catch, harder to hold on to. Whitney would bring papers for Mom and Dad to sign, her voice low and reassuring. "Just formalities for Livia's care," she'd say. "Medical power of attorney, access to her accounts to pay the bills." It all sounded so reasonable, so necessary. I remember trying to say something, a flicker of unease even then, but the words wouldn't form. A frustrated groan was all I could manage. Whitney would pat my arm. "Shh, sweetie. Don't try to talk. Rest now." The first real crack in my deliberately cultivated fog of helplessness came about 6 months in. Whitney had left a stack of mail on the kitchen island, and a bank statement for an account I vaguely remembered having some control over before. I wheeled myself closer, my movement still clumsy. A withdrawal. A very large withdrawal. My brow furrowed. "Whitney?" I called out, my voice raspy from disuse. She bustled in, all fake concern. "What is it, Liv? Are you all right?" I pointed a shaky finger at the line item. "What's this?" She peered at it, then waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, that's just for some of your specialized equipment, sweetie. And a down payment on the new physical therapist. Top of the line, very expensive, but you're worth it." Specialized equipment? I was using the same standard issue wheelchair and a few resistance bands. And my current physical therapist, Stella, was wonderful, but I doubted she cost that much. A cold knot formed in my stomach. That was the day the real Livia, the one Whitney thought was buried under a mountain of trauma and medication, started to wake up. I began my archive of her deceit. When she thought I was asleep, I wasn't. I was listening. Her phone calls with Jet were a goldmine. "Booked the flights, first class, obviously," she'd crow. "And the hotel suite? You're going to love the view, baby." My view was the damn rose-patterned wallpaper Whitney had insisted would be cheering. My fine motor skills were shot after the accident. Holding a pen felt like trying to grip a live eel. But every night after Whitney had tucked me in with a saccharine, "Sleep tight, don't let the bedbugs bite. I'll make sure they don't," I'd retrieve a cheap pen and a little notepad I'd managed to palm from a side table during one of Mom's visits. Under the covers, with the dim glow of my nightlight, I'd practice. My name, dates, numbers. At first, it was an illegible scrawl, but slowly, painstakingly, my handwriting started to resemble something human again. Each cramped letter was a tiny act of rebellion. One afternoon, Whitney came home laden with shopping bags from a notoriously expensive boutique. She dumped them on her bed, pulling out a silk dress that cost more than my monthly disability check. She'd carelessly left the receipt on her dresser. Later, when she was in the shower, humming off-key to some pop song, I wheeled myself into her room, my heart hammered against my ribs. My old tablet, the one I'd told her I only used for looking at pretty pictures because it was easy, was in my lap. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the camera function. Click. The photo was blurry, but the store name and the astronomical sum were clear enough. My first piece of concrete evidence. I felt a grim sort of triumph. A few weeks later, I decided to try and access my main trust fund account online. I knew the password, or at least I used to. I typed it in. Incorrect password. I tried again. Incorrect password. A chill snaked down my spine. She'd changed it. The next day, Whitney breezed in with the mail, sorting through it at the kitchen counter. "Anything for me?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She smiled, that tight, false smile. No, sweetie, just boring bills and statements for me to handle. Don't you worry about it. She scooped up a thick envelope from the trust company, one I used to receive directly, and tucked it into her purse. Later that evening, I overheard her on the phone with Mom. Her voice was laced with that practiced, concerned tone. "Livia was asking about the trust fund statements again today, Mom. She seems, I don't know, almost paranoid about money lately. It's a bit worrying, isn't it, with her condition and all?" Paranoid. The word hung in the air, a cold, calculated threat. She wasn't just stealing from me, she was actively building a case against my sanity. The game had just become a lot more dangerous. The word paranoid echoed in my head for days. Whitney was laying the groundwork, brick by insidious brick, to discredit me completely. I knew then I couldn't do this alone. My secret notes and blurry receipt photos weren't going to be enough to fight a narrative she'd been carefully crafting for 2 years. I needed help. Professional help. My mind snagged on Stella, my former physical therapist. Whitney had eventually dismissed her, claiming Stella was too gentle and that I needed a more rigorous approach. The truth was, Stella had been too observant. I remembered the way Stella's eyes would narrow slightly when Whitney would interrupt my sessions with some patronizing comment about my progress, or lack thereof. Once, after Whitney had particularly steamrollered me about needing to try harder, Stella had squeezed my hand when Whitney wasn't looking and given me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a tiny gesture, but it had spoken volumes. Stella suspected something. The problem was contacting her. Whitney monitored my phone calls, the few she allowed, and my access to the outside world was severely limited. My chance came during one of Whitney's essential doctor's appointments for me. It was with a new neurologist she'd found, probably one she'd pre-briefed about my delicate mental state. While Whitney was schmoozing with the receptionist, feigning concern about a billing issue, I was left alone in an examination room for a few minutes. My heart pounded. I fumbled for the emergency call button, disguised as a nurse call. A moment later, a kind-faced nurse popped her head in. "Everything okay, dear? Could I possibly use the phone for a private call?" I asked, trying to sound frail and a little confused. "Just a quick one, to an old friend." She hesitated, then smiled. "Of course. Just be quick, the doctor will be in soon." She handed me the desk phone. My fingers, still clumsy but more practiced now from my secret writing sessions, dialed Stella's number from memory. It rang twice. "Hello, Stella speaking." "Stella," I whispered, my voice tight. "It's Livia." A beat of silence. "Livia? Oh my goodness, are you all right? Where are you?" "No time," I said, glancing at the door. "Whitney. I need help. A lawyer. Someone good. Someone discreet. Can you help me find someone?" Another pause, then Stella's voice, firm and low. "Yes, Livia, I can. I know just the person. Don't worry. How can I reach you safely?" I don't know," I stammered, panic rising as I heard Whitney's voice approaching in the hallway. "I have to go. Call me back." "No, don't. I'll figure something out." I hung up just as Whitney swept back into the room, her smile firmly in place. "All sorted, sweetie. The doctor will see you now." The next few days were agonizing. How could I get a message to Stella? Then, a small miracle. Stella called the house, ostensibly to check in on my progress and see if I needed any follow-up advice. Whitney, surprisingly, let the call through, probably thinking it would reinforce her narrative if an old therapist confirmed my lack of improvement. "Livia, dear, so good to hear your voice," Stella said, her tone professionally warm, but with an undercurrent I recognized. "I was just thinking, I'm in your neighborhood next Tuesday. Perhaps I could pop by for a quick cup of tea. Just a social call." Whitney, listening on speakerphone as she always did, chimed in. "Oh, that's so thoughtful of you, Stella. Livia would love that, wouldn't you, sweetie?" I managed a weak, "Yes, please." The social call was a masterclass in covert operations. While Whitney fussed in the kitchen, Making a show of being the perfect hostess, Stella slipped a folded piece of paper into my hand. On it was a name and a number: Jordan Valdez, attorney at law. Underneath, a scribbled note: "He's expecting you to find a way. He's good. Trust him." The meeting with Jordan was arranged with cloak and dagger precision. Stella created a diversion involving a sudden physical therapy emergency that required her to borrow me for an hour to demonstrate an exercise to another fictional patient's caregiver nearby. Whitney, eager to appear cooperative with any semblance of my rehabilitation, reluctantly agreed. Jordan's office was small, unassuming. He was younger than I expected, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. I poured out my story, the words tumbling over each other. I showed him my blurry photo, my painstakingly written notes detailing overheard conversations and suspicious transactions. He listened patiently, asking pointed questions, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. "She's systematically isolating you and draining your trust fund, based on what you're telling me," he said finally, his voice calm but firm. "This is a serious case of financial abuse and manipulation, Livia. I'll take it. We can work out payment from the recovered funds once we win." A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled my knees washed over me. Someone believed me. Someone was going to fight for me. But as Stella wheeled me back home, a new anxiety set in. Whitney was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed, a thin, unsmiling line for a mouth. "You were gone a while," she said, her voice flat. "You seem a little more alert today, Livia. Did Stella give you some new miracle cure?" Later that evening I saw it. A small black camera, mounted discreetly in the corner of my room, its tiny lens pointing directly at my bed. Whitney came in, fluffing my pillows. "Just a little something extra for your safety, sweetie," she said, her smile like a razor blade. "Can't be too careful, you know." The air in my gilded cage suddenly felt a whole lot colder. The risk had just skyrocketed. The nanny cam. Whitney's little safety measure turned my room, my supposed sanctuary, into a surveillance state. Every move I made, every word I might mumble in my sleep, was potentially being recorded. The constant scrutiny was a suffocating blanket of paranoia, far more real than the paranoia Whitney accused me of. How could I possibly communicate with Jordan now? How could I continue to gather evidence? Stella, bless her resourceful soul, came up with the solution. During her next social visit, carefully orchestrated to appear casual, she brought a gift. A large, fluffy teddy bear, the kind I'd had as a child. "Just a little something to keep you company, Livia," she said, winking almost imperceptibly as Whitney cooed over how thoughtful it was. Tucked deep within its plush belly, nestled amongst the stuffing, was a tiny, voice-activated recorder, and later slipped into my hand during a staged coughing fit that required Stella to pat my back, was a cheap, untraceable burner phone. "For emergencies only," she'd whispered, her eyes conveying the seriousness. "Texts are best, short, coded if you can." My life became a shadow game. During the day, I was Livia, the fragile, confused invalid. I'd talk to the teddy bear, stroking its fur, sometimes whispering nonsense, sometimes carefully positioning it to catch Whitney's damning conversations when she was in the room. "Oh, Mr. Snuggles," I'd murmur loudly if Whitney was nearby, "you're my bestest friend." Whitney would just roll her eyes, probably thinking I was regressing. Perfect. At night, when the house was silent and Whitney was presumably asleep or out with Jet, living it up on my dime, I'd retrieve the recorder. Huddled under my blankets, the burner phone clutched in my hand, I'd listen to the day's recordings, my stomach churning at Whitney's casual cruelty, her blatant lies. Then I'd compose carefully worded, encrypted texts to Jordan. "Package W received payment X today," meaning Whitney had made another large withdrawal. Or, "Subject J boasting about new acquisition Y," meaning Jet was flaunting another expensive toy. There were so many close calls. One afternoon, Whitney came in unexpectedly while I was trying to hide the burner phone under my mattress. I shoved it deep, my heart leaping into my throat, and feigned a sudden, intense pain in my leg. "Oh, sweetie, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with that fake sympathy that made me want to scream. I managed to distract her, but my hands were shaking for an hour afterward. Another time, she picked up Mr. Snuggles, idly fluffing his fur. "You really like this old thing, don't you?" she said. I held my breath, terrified she'd feel the hard outline of the recorder. But she just tossed him back on the bed, oblivious. The emotional toll was immense. The constant fear of discovery, the simmering rage that I had to keep banked, the profound isolation. It was a heavy burden. The hardest part was seeing my parents, Evelyn and Rory. They'd visit, their faces etched with worry, and Whitney would feed them her carefully constructed narrative. "Livia had another bad night, Mom," she'd say, shaking her head sadly. "She was talking about people stealing her money again. It's just so hard to see her like this." Mom would look at me, her eyes filled with pity and a helplessness that tore at me. "Oh, my poor girl," she'd whisper, stroking my hair. "Don't you worry, darling. Whitney is taking such good care of you." I wanted to scream, "She's the one stealing! She's the reason I'm like this!" But I couldn't. Not yet. So I'd just offer a weak, vacant smile, playing my part, while inside another piece of my heart chipped away. Their blindness, their implicit trust in Whitney, was a betrayal almost as sharp as Whitney's own. They were supposed to protect me, and instead, they were enabling my tormentor. One evening, Jordan called on the burner phone, his voice urgent. "Livia, I've found something. Whitney isn't just making withdrawals. She's been making changes to the trust itself, shifting investments, changing beneficiaries on certain sub-accounts. This isn't amateur hour stuff. She's had to have help." "Help? From who?" I whispered, my blood running cold. "I'm looking into the financial advisor, the one who's supposed to be managing the trust for the family, Darnell Griffin. His signature is on some of these authorization forms alongside Whitney's forged version of yours. I think he might be in on it." Darnell. I remembered him from before the accident. A portly man with a slick smile and an air of unshakable confidence. He'd always made my skin crawl. The betrayal, I realized, wasn't just Whitney. It was a conspiracy. And the web was wider and more tangled than I'd ever imagined. The fight just got a whole lot bigger. Whitney must have sensed something shifting, a subtle change in the air, or maybe her greed was just making her impatient. Whatever the reason, she started to escalate. The casual mentions of my fragility to our parents became more frequent, more pointed. "You know, Mom, Dad," she'd say over dinner, her voice dripping with faux concern as she cut my food into tiny, unnecessary pieces. "I'm really starting to worry about Livia. She seems to be slipping, more confused than usual. I think we might need to consider more intensive care options." Intensive care. I knew exactly what that was code for. She was going to try and get me locked away permanently. The nanny cam in my room suddenly felt less like a nuisance and more like a tool she could use to build her case, twisting any moment of frustration or despair into proof of my instability. Then came the appointments. Whitney started scheduling consultations with psychiatrists. "Just to get a second opinion, sweetie," she'd chirp, patting my hand. "Make sure we're doing everything we can for you." She chose them carefully, I was sure. Probably older, more traditional doctors she thought would be easily swayed by a devoted sister's tearful plea. I'd sit in their plush offices, Whitney by my side, spinning her tale of my tragic decline. "She has these paranoid delusions, doctor," Whitney would say, dabbing at a non-existent tear. "She thinks people are stealing from her. She gets agitated, confused. It's heartbreaking to watch." I'd play my part, offering mumbled, incoherent responses, staring blankly ahead. It was a dangerous game. I had to appear unwell enough to fit her narrative, but not so unwell that they'd immediately recommend commitment without further observation. Observation that might expose my charade. Jordan was working tirelessly, Through back channels and sheer legal grit, he was unearthing the full, horrifying extent of Whitney's scheme. "She's forged your signature on dozens of withdrawal slips, Livia," he told me during one of our brief, whispered calls on the burner phone. "We've got a handwriting expert ready to testify. And those medical reports she's been submitting to the trust to justify her control? They're heavily exaggerated, some parts outright fabricated. She's painted a picture of you as completely incapacitated." The systematic depletion of my trust fund was staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars siphoned off through a complex network of transfers and shell accounts that Darnell, the family's supposedly neutral financial advisor, had clearly helped her set up. "It's worse than we thought with Darnell," Jordan said a few days later, his voice grim. "He wasn't just passively complicit. He's been actively coaching Whitney. We found emails. He advised her on how to phrase her concerns about your mental state, which doctors to approach, even how to best manipulate your parents. And he's been getting substantial kickbacks for his services." Darnell. That slimy toad. He hadn't just enabled Whitney. He'd been her partner in crime, her mentor in deceit. The anger that had been simmering inside me for months threatened to boil over. I wanted to confront them, to scream, to rage. But Jordan's voice, calm and steady, pulled me back. "Not yet, Livia. We need to be smart. Let her think she's winning. Let her get overconfident." And Whitney was certainly overconfident. She breezed into my room one morning, a triumphant glint in her eye. "Good news, sweetie," she announced, her smile wider and more predatory than usual. "I've managed to get you an appointment with Dr. Emily Rogers. She's one of the best psychiatrists in the state. Very renowned. She's going to help us figure out the best long-term plan for you." Dr. Emily Rogers. The name sounded vaguely familiar. Whitney continued, practically purring. "This will be the final consultation, Livia. After we speak with Dr. Rogers, I'm sure all your struggles will finally be over. I'll be able to take proper care of you without all this uncertainty." Her meaning was crystal clear. This was it. This was her endgame. Dr. Rogers was meant to be the final nail in my coffin, the expert witness who would rubber stamp Whitney's petition to have me declared legally incompetent, paving the way for her to have me committed and gain permanent, unassailable control over what was left of my inheritance. I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but beneath it, a flicker of something else. A cold, hard resolve. Whitney thought she was leading me to the slaughter. She had no idea I was walking into that office armed with the truth, and that her carefully constructed world of lies was about to come crashing down around her. The noose she thought she was tightening around my neck was actually one she'd fashioned for herself. "Dr. Rogers," Jordan confirmed over the burner phone later that night, his voice tight with urgency. "She's highly respected, very thorough. Whitney's aiming high. She clearly thinks Dr. Rogers will be the one to seal the deal for her." "So, what do we do?" I whispered, my gaze flicking to Mr. Snuggles on the nightstand, the silent sentinel. The nanny cam in the corner seemed to mock me. "We use it," Jordan said, a new edge to his voice. "This is our chance, Livia. Whitney's overconfidence is our greatest weapon. She's walking you into the lion's den, but she doesn't know we've already spoken to the zookeeper." The plan was audacious, risky, but it was the only shot we had. Jordan explained that he'd already initiated contact with Dr. Rogers' office, discreetly, through a colleague. With my explicit, tearfully feigned consent, overheard by Whitney, of course, during a staged, confused phone call where I begged for help, Jordan was going to provide Dr. Rogers with a preliminary overview of our case against Whitney, just enough to make her wary, to make her look closer. "You need to play your part perfectly, Livia," Jordan instructed. "Whitney wants to see you deteriorating. You give her a masterpiece of a decline. Make her believe she has you exactly where she wants you. The more confident she is, the harder she'll fall." So, I began my descent. My carefully constructed fog became a dense, impenetrable miasma. I'd stare blankly at the television for hours. I'd mumble incoherently when spoken to. I forgot how to feed myself properly, spilling food, much to Whitney's theatrical sighs of exasperation in front of our parents. "See, Mom, Dad, it's getting worse. Dr. Rogers' appointment can't come soon enough. Evelyn and Rory looked increasingly distressed, their faces etched with a mixture of sorrow and helplessness. It was a cruel performance, and a part of me hated myself for the pain I was causing them, even if it was a necessary deception. But every time I saw Whitney's smug, satisfied smirk, my resolve hardened. Behind the scenes, Jordan was a whirlwind of activity. He compiled every piece of evidence. The audio recordings from Mr. Snuggles, meticulously transcribed, the financial statements showing the systematic looting of my trust, copies of the forged signatures and falsified medical reports, Stella's sworn affidavit detailing her suspicions, and Whitney's manipulative behavior. He even managed to get a statement from a disgruntled former employee of Darnell's firm, corroborating his unethical practices. He liaised with the local police department's financial crimes unit, briefing them, getting them ready to act on his signal. The days leading up to the appointment with Dr. Rogers were a blur of terror and a strange, grim anticipation. I felt like an actor preparing for the role of a lifetime, a role where a single misstep could mean utter ruin. Sleep was elusive. When I did drift off, my dreams were a chaotic jumble of Whitney's mocking laughter and the cold, sterile corridors of a psychiatric ward. The morning of the appointment dawned gray and oppressive, mirroring my mood. Whitney was practically vibrating with excitement, though she masked it with her usual saccharine concern. She helped me dress, choosing an outfit that made me look particularly frail and childlike. "There now, sweetie," she said, smoothing down my hair, her reflection in the mirror showing a triumphant gleam in her eyes. "You look presentable." She patted my hand, her touch lingering a moment too long. "Soon, all your worries will be over, Livia. I'll take care of everything. You won't have to think about a single thing ever again." Her words, meant to be reassuring, sent a shiver of pure ice down my spine. She was promising me oblivion, a living death, all wrapped up in a pretty bow of sisterly concern. I looked up at her, forcing my lips into a weak, tremulous smile. I let my eyes appear unfocused, defeated. "Thank you, Whitney," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You're so good to me." But as she turned away, satisfied with my apparent submission, the weak smile vanished. My eyes, if she'd bothered to look closely, held a spark of something else entirely. Not fear, not defeat, but a cold, hard fire. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the final act was about to begin. Dr. Rogers' office was calming, all muted tones and soft lighting, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. Whitney guided me to a plush armchair, fussing over me like a mother hen. Our parents, Evelyn and Rory, sat on a nearby sofa, their faces pale and drawn, radiating anxiety. They looked at me with such profound pity it was almost unbearable. "Thank you for seeing us, Dr. Rogers," Whitney began, her voice a carefully modulated blend of concern and sorrow. "As I explained on the phone, we're just so worried about Livia. Her condition has been deteriorating rapidly." Dr. Rogers, a woman with kind eyes and an unnervingly perceptive gaze, listened patiently, her hands clasped in her lap. She nodded occasionally, her expression unreadable. Whitney launched into her performance, painting a vivid picture of my supposed decline. She spoke of my paranoid delusions, my inability to manage basic tasks, my increasing agitation and confusion. She produced a sheaf of papers, no doubt the falsified medical reports and her own carefully curated notes. "It's come to the point where I feel that she needs more intensive, specialized care, for her own safety and well-being, of course." She dabbed at her eyes with the tissue. "It breaks my heart to say it, but I don't think she's capable of making decisions for herself anymore." Mom let out a small, choked sob. Dad reached over and took her hand, his own trembling. Dr. Rogers turned to me. "Livia," she said gently, "what are your thoughts on what your sister is saying?" I looked down at my lap, picking at a loose thread on my trousers. I mumbled something incoherent, just as I'd practiced. I could feel Whitney's smug satisfaction radiating across the room. She thought she had this in the bag. Then, a soft knock on the door. Dr. Rogers looked up. "Come in." The door opened and Jordan Valdez stepped into the room. Whitney's head snapped around. Her eyes widened, her perfectly composed expression faltering for the first time. What are you doing here?" she stammered, her voice suddenly sharp, losing its syrupy sweetness. "I'm Livia's legal counsel, Ms. Mackenzie," Jordan said calmly, his gaze steady. "And I believe I have some information that will be highly relevant to this consultation." He placed his briefcase on Dr. Rogers' desk and opened it. "Dr. Rogers," he began, "my client Livia has been the victim of a systematic campaign of financial abuse, manipulation, and gaslighting orchestrated by her sister, Whitney, for the past 2 years." Whitney shot to her feet. "This is outrageous. He's lying. Livia is unwell. She doesn't know what she's saying. She's easily influenced." "Please, Ms. Mackenzie, sit down," Dr. Rogers said, her voice firm but quiet. Whitney, flustered and red-faced, reluctantly sank back into her chair. Jordan then proceeded to lay out our case, piece by damning piece. He presented the bank statements, the forged withdrawal slips, the evidence of Darnell's complicity. He played snippets from Mr. Snuggles's recordings, Whitney's gloating calls with Jet, her callous dismissal of my well-being, her coaching sessions with Darnell. He showed Dr. Rogers the photos of Whitney's lavish purchases, all funded by my stolen inheritance. He presented Stella's detailed affidavit. With each new piece of evidence, the color drained from Whitney's face. Her confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a mask of disbelief, then dawning horror. Mom and Dad stared, open-mouthed, their expressions shifting from pity for me to stunned confusion, then to a sickening realization. "As you can see, Doctor," Jordan concluded, "Livia is far from incapacitated. In fact, she has shown remarkable courage and resourcefulness in gathering this evidence while under extreme duress." Dr. Rogers looked from the evidence to Whitney, then to me. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Ms. Mackenzie," she said, her voice cool and professional, "I must admit, I had my suspicions. Mr. Valdez contacted my office last week. Livia is clearly a very intelligent and resilient young woman." Whitney started to sputter, a torrent of denials and accusations. "She's faking it. She's always been manipulative. This is all a lie. You can't believe her." Just then, another knock on the door. This time it wasn't Jordan. 2 uniformed police officers stepped into the room. Whitney's eyes darted towards them, pure, unadulterated panic flaring in her gaze. "Whitney Mackenzie," one of the officers said, his voice devoid of emotion, "you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and elder abuse." He moved towards her, handcuffs glinting in his hand. "No! You can't do this!" Whitney shrieked, scrambling back in her chair. "It's a mistake! Livia, tell them! Tell them it's not true!" I met her wild, desperate gaze, and for the first time in 2 years, I let the full force of my anger, my pain, and my cold, hard satisfaction show. I said nothing. The click of the handcuffs snapping around Whitney's wrists was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Her confident smirk was gone, irrevocably gone, replaced by the raw, ugly face of her ruin. As they led her away, still screaming and struggling, she turned back, her face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this! You ungrateful, manipulative bitch!" I just watched her go, silent and unyielding. Mom was openly weeping now, Dad looking utterly devastated, his gaze shifting between Whitney's retreating figure and me, the daughter he'd so profoundly misjudged. The truth had finally, brutally, crashed down upon them. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, less dramatic than the movies. Whitney, stripped of her designer clothes and her arrogant demeanor, looked diminished, almost pathetic, in her ill-fitting county-issue jumpsuit. The trial itself was a blur of legal jargon, testimonies, and the relentless presentation of evidence Jordan had so meticulously gathered. Darnell, who had flipped almost immediately to save his own skin, painted a damning picture of Whitney's greed and meticulous planning. Stella's calm, clear testimony about Whitney's manipulative behavior and my own quiet strength resonated with the jury. When the foreperson read the verdict, guilty on all counts, a wave of something profound washed over me. It wasn't elation, not exactly. It was more like the settling of a great turbulent sea. Justice, cold, hard, and undeniable. Whitney received a significant prison sentence. Darnell got off lighter for his cooperation, but his career was ruined, his reputation in tatters. Good. The trust fund, or what was left of it after Whitney's systematic plundering, was returned to my control. It was considerably smaller, but still enough. Enough for a fresh start. Enough for freedom. Rebuilding wasn't easy. The physical therapy was grueling, but this time it was on my terms, with therapists I chose, who treated me with respect. My body, slowly but surely, began to obey me again. The simple act of walking unaided across my new small apartment, an apartment I'd chosen and paid for myself, felt like a monumental victory. My relationship with Evelyn and Rory was complicated. They were drowning in guilt, their faces a constant mask of apology and regret. "We should have seen it, Livia," Mom would say, her voice thick with unshed tears during one of our stilted weekly phone calls. "How could we have been so blind?" "You trusted her," I'd reply, my voice flat. It was the truth, but it offered little comfort, to them or to me. The chasm Whitney had created between us was vast. They had failed me, catastrophically. Forgiveness felt like a distant, unreachable shore. Maybe someday, but not yet. For now, there was just a painful, awkward space filled with unspoken accusations and the ghosts of what our family used to be. I started seeing a therapist of my own. Not Dr. Rogers, but someone Jordan recommended, someone specialized in trauma. "We're not aiming for forgiveness, Livia," Dr. Chen said during one of our early sessions, her gaze kind but direct. "We're aiming for you to heal. Forgiveness is a separate journey, if you even choose to take it." Her words were a lifeline. I didn't have to forgive Whitney. I didn't have to forgive my parents. Not yet. I just had to heal myself. One afternoon, sorting through boxes of old belongings, I found Mr. Snuggles. I picked him up, his fur a little matted, his button eyes still fixed in that perpetually surprised expression. He'd been my silent confidant, my unwitting accomplice. I almost threw him out, a relic of a past I wanted to forget. But then I stopped. He was also a symbol of my resilience, of the quiet fight I'd waged from within my gilded cage. I placed him on a bookshelf, a reminder. The desire for revenge, the all-consuming need to see Whitney pay for what she'd done, had been a powerful fuel. And yes, there was a grim satisfaction in her downfall, a sense that karma, with a little help from me, had finally delivered. But sitting in my own living room, sunlight streaming through the window, a cup of coffee I'd made myself in my hand, I realized the true victory wasn't just her punishment. It was this quiet moment of peace, this reclaimed life. I started taking online courses, exploring subjects I'd always been curious about, but never had the chance to pursue. I reconnected with a few old friends, the real ones, the ones Whitney hadn't managed to poison against me. It was awkward at first, explaining the lost years, the deception. But true friendship, I learned, was more resilient than I'd thought. The future still felt uncertain, a path unfolding one step at a time. The scars of Whitney's betrayal would always be there, a faint silver tracing on my soul. But they no longer defined me. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal, the kind that comes from within your own blood, and I had not only survived, but I had fought back. I had reclaimed my voice, my assets, my freedom. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all, not just seeing her fall, but watching myself rise.